Great. Okay, true.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to start off by asking you a question just to get the ball rolling.
Okay.
Um, why do you feel like there needs to be a conversation or a kinder conversation around weight loss? Why does this need to happen now?
I think we flipped the script a bit quickly, and you and I agree, diets don't work. We know why they don't work. We know why they're not effective. We know why why people's weight is not an accurate representation of their health. Uh, we know all this stuff, and yet I think people are scared to have that conversation if they still want to change their weight or they want to manage their weight. And I think there needs to be a conversation where we appreciate that people like myself, for example, became very overweight or fluctuated in weight massively as a result of abusing food and neglecting ourselves and eating to the point of discomfort and
Yeah.
binge eating and restricting. And in my case, it manifested itself as an enormous amount of excess weight, which I didn't happen to want. That was very much not a case of loving food so much and too much of a good thing. What came with it was an enormous amount of neglect. And I believe that those behaviors that actually caused me to isolate, gain enormous amounts of weight, really damaged my body image and my self-esteem, were a direct result of going on all these diets. And they left me with conflicting nutritional advice and all or nothing thinking, and not taking the same common sense advice that I would give my loved ones about food and nutrition. And I think a lot of us need to unlearn that stuff. But I think it's become such a scary conversation that we've kind of been silenced. And so now I have all these clients who are saying, I'd never want my daughter to have the same eating habits that I do, but I haven't unlearned mine yet. They're so ingrained. And but now I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to be seen to be endorsing weight loss. And I think it's important to say that, we're not talking about weight loss, we're talking about unwanted eating habits, the byproduct of which, for some of us, is a fluctuation in weight.
Yeah.
And it is your prerogative to say, this is what feels right this is what feels right for me. And I think that I think we need to have more conversations about that so that people feel like they can communicate in a way that says, look, I'm not looking to body shame, and I certainly don't promote diets. I mean, you and I know that 100%. But I would like to change my habits, and it is my prerogative to want to say with honesty that sometimes I don't feel comfortable, and I want to be able to adjust that if I want to, without feeling judged or without having to deprive myself or go back into this place of isolation and neglect.
Yeah, and like in a way, what you bring up here is like it's a fear for people, isn't it? It's like a form of self-punishment in a way. What when we think about weight loss, because the first things that we hear are deprivation, restriction, like there's quite an interesting. I'm going to be a nerd on this and bring in a few studies, but there's quite an interesting study where they flashed up the word diet on screens when people were doing like a cognitive load task, so they were doing like a calculus task or a calculating task or some sort of task that actually required brain power, and they'd flash up the word diet on the screen, and the people that received that word diet on the screen were much more likely to then overeat when they were presented with food after the task. And then they did another study, and for the life of me I can't remember who the author was, but I can link to it. But they did another study where those that thought about the word diet over a couple of days overcompensated in what they ate, because this anticipated feelings of deprivation, of restriction, of all of those things, which I think is what you're talking to there as well. Like people are almost afraid to say they want to lose weight in a way because all they know and all they associate with it is that punishment, that kind of inner drill sergeant, that berating yourself on a daily basis, having to think about every little choice, and I suppose that a lot of that comes from, a lot of us grew up on Weight Watchers, with Weight Watchers and calorie counting, being big fads, and that we need to calculate, and it's all a game of kind of crime and punishment when it comes to weight.
And all these
I don't know.
sins.
Oh yeah. Oh,
this is a sin. And actually, Weight Watchers, interestingly enough, Heather, with the clients that I speak to, and in my own experience, Weight Watchers to some extent at least taught people to consume a range of different foods and not be scared of them.
Yeah.
You know, the reason I think a lot of my binge eating behaviors began, and a lot of my clients' ones begin, is because we went on these diets where we had to completely cut out entire food groups. And we started to associate them with either having none of them or loads of them, because we were being good or we were being bad.
I know, it's the moralize. I feel like that it's the click. It's the moralization of your choices. It's like, I'm a good person if I weigh this much. I'm a good person if I eat these things. I'm being good if I do these things, and I'm being bad and I'm self-sabotaging and I'm rebelling against myself and all of these things if I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so disempowering. It's really, really disempowering. And it makes you feel like incapable of making a decision about food on the spot that you would recommend a loved one made.
Yeah.
And I think so much of this is about unlearning and like restoring ourselves to a place of common sense.
So how do we then, Shrew, how do we unlearn these learned behaviors? So how do we unlearn, let's say it's Friday night, which it is, well, not yet, but you know, like, and we want to have a drink and not feel guilty about it, or we want to kind of indulge a little bit. I mean, we don't want to feel guilty about it. How do we step, and I'm turning the deep end here. This is not, I don't know if I fully cracked this yet, but like, you know, how do we unlearn these things? Or maybe that's not the best place to start.
Well, I think we need to put forward a compelling case for not beating ourselves up about what we've eaten. And I think that for a lot of us, if we're honest, that case needs to be based on a lot more than just, I don't deserve this and I should do things intuitively, etc. And I think that is, in my case, feeling bad about what you've eaten makes you want to do the things that you do when you feel bad. And for some of us, that's eat. So in that sense, it is absolutely counterproductive. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
I was wondering actually, when you said about the diet thing flashing up and people overcompensating almost in preparation, like that final binge mentality, right?
Yeah.
I also wondered whether, and this is just
on Monday, you know,
Monday, exactly. I'm just pulling this out of my head, but I'm also wondering whether there's something about your stress levels increasing because of the associations that you have with diets.
Yeah.
And again, what do you do when you're stressed? A lot of us overeat.
The funny thing is, I love that you bring that up. So there's nerd, and there's another study that I read recently, and again, I can try.
This is what I love about you, Heather. Everything I say, you're like, let me tell you why it's evidence-based. I want you to just follow me around.
You are the sage and I am the geek. This is how it works. But it was so interesting because it shows that dieting causes feelings of deprivation and feelings of stress. It causes those things. And yet that's actually then what causes you to gain weight as well. So weight gain is associated with feelings of deprivation and feelings of stress. And so it's so cyclical, because it's like you diet, it makes you stressed, it makes you feel like you're being restricted. And actually that's what leads to long-term weight gain, is feelings like, you know, often, and what they found in this study is feelings of stress and feelings of deprivation. So you're right on the money there.
Absolutely. And I think, thank you. And back to your point on how do we unlearn this? I think it's about seeing progress as not weight lost. It's about, well, first of all, I have so many things to say about this, but first of all, I think it's about working out which one of those behaviors, like this is my association with bread. I can either have no bread or a whole loaf of bread, but I don't currently feel that I have the capacity to have 2 slices because of some ridiculous low carb diet that I've gone on in the past, right? But I know that in the long term, in order to sustain weight loss in a healthy and enjoyable and manageable way, I'm going to need to know how to eat 2 pieces of bread and enjoy it and actually love bread again. So my mission would be, okay, the next 20 times I have bread, I'm just going to focus only on trying to have the 2 pieces. And there will be a lot of people who never understand how difficult that is. Like, I found it more difficult to eat foods that aren't helpful for weight loss in moderation than I did to write a book. It's like, it was my Everest. The other thing that we do, and I'm sure that you know the evidence base behind this as well, is that, I have a feeling you might, is that, you know, these diets, they all have like an activation phase and then a maintenance phase, with the presumption being that having lost weight is going to be enough to know how to eat differently.
Yeah.
What do those two things have to do with each other? Yeah. Right? And also, why give so much value? And it's extraordinary how much value we're giving to being able to lose weight. Oh, well done. Now that you've lost weight, here's this whole, kind of does a disservice to all the stuff that we know and we've read and we've studied, to think that just by virtue of the fact that you've lost some weight, all of a sudden you know how to change your behaviors and embed them. And so people become really disillusioned. Yeah. And so we end up doing things to lose weight that we know we can't do to keep it off. Yeah. So whenever people want me to help them to manage their weight, I always tell them, okay, pretend I've waved a magic wand and you've already lost the weight. Tell me what you would need to do in order to enjoyably maintain it. And so invariably they will say, well, I still need to eat chocolate, and I still need ice cream in my life, and I still need alcohol in my life. And so the task then becomes saying, by the way, everyone doesn't need all those things in their lives, but you know, they're things that a lot of us like. But so the task then becomes saying, okay, well, so I guess what we need to learn really is how you can start behaving as though you've already got there.
Yeah, it's so funny because I love this. I'm just vibing on this in a big way. But I always ask people what they can't live without, and let's start with that. You know, let's start with that. What are the things that you do not want to be deprived of, and the second that they're taken away from you, you know, because it's deprivation that throws people off track. Whereas the interesting thing is, and this is actually in one of the research studies that I did, we looked at, well, what does it take for long-term maintenance to occur? So what are the key characteristics of those people that maintain long-term versus those that maybe maintain for a while and regain and maintain for a while? And these are people that were maybe obese or morbidly obese and then managed to get their weight down into kind of, you know, and we can always talk about what a normal BMI range is. And I don't like the word normal either, because, you know, it depends on you and your body and your, loads of different factors. But those that were successful maintainers, they felt like they could have anything they wanted at any stage. They never felt like they were necessarily deprived. They felt empowered that they could make the choice. And then there's another kind of off the back of that we discussed, like there's a research where have to goals versus want to goals. Those goals that you feel that you have to do, that you should do that. And I always talk about shoulding on yourself, you know, you should never should on yourself, but those goals that you feel like you should do. And often that's how many people feel in this weight loss phase, you know, the shoulding. We can't stick to those. Whereas if we actually decide that it's a conscious choice, I want to feel healthier. I want to feel more empowered in my body. I want to have more energy. I want to be able to, you know, give back to my friends, my family relationships, my community, whatever happens to be. Those are the goals, you know, that's the way we kind of be able to stick to changes. And just a final note on this is, so those that actually pursue weight loss rather than healthy lifestyle changes are much less likely to be successful long term. So if weight loss is the goal, it's not likely that you'll be successful long term.
So it needs to be the byproduct of behavioural change.
It's a positive side effect.
If that's what you were after, I completely agree. And that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
But then knowing that, and knowing if someone wants to lose weight, how do you help them reframe that?
Do you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about back when I was trying to sort out my eating habits and, you know, balance out my weight in a way that felt right for me. If someone had said, yeah, but deprivation isn't the way, you know, and people started talking about intuitive eating, you know, and they used to say to me, just, you know, notice when you're done and stop then.
Well, you're like, well, the packet of crisps is done, so I must be done.
I'm possessed. You can consider me possessed right now. Like, no, nothing's coming in here. As if in the middle of a binge, I'm going to be like, I think that four packets of Pringles is enough for me. Yeah. It's just, I was so far away from having any connection with my body. And this diet rubbish was so ingrained in my head that all or nothing feast or famine stuff was just, no one gave enough importance to how difficult it is for some people to make those moderate choices. And so initially, I completely understand why deprivation seems easier, because I've worked in addiction services, right? So I know that, for example, if you wanted to drink less, as opposed to not drink it all. And listen, I know everyone's in a different kind of a position with this, so just everybody take it with a pinch of salt, whoever watches this. But abstinence from something or complete restriction from something has its benefits. You're not constantly negotiating all day about it. When I talk to people who were as sick as about talking about food and thinking about food and their bodies all day, you know, it becomes exhausting. From the second you wake up, you're beating yourself up. Am I going to be good? Am I going to be bad? Am I on a diet? Am I not on a diet? Have I put on weight? Is my face puffy? It's just, it takes up your whole brain.
And actually, sure, to interrupt you there, the interesting thing about that is that thoughts are habits too. So the more you think in a certain way, the more likely it is that you think in a certain way, and the more likely that those thoughts will actually dominate your day. So,
and you're locked in that pattern, right? And you just see it as the norm. It's just your norm.
Yeah.
And so actually cutting something out in the short term is quite a compelling thing, because you're like, oh, but you know what? I don't have to make any decisions around that food. And so I understand, and it's so sad to me that we have to go to that place, and it becomes easier to not consume something at all, even if we love it, than have to worry about how much and when and how we're going to consume it. And so I understand that. And interestingly enough, I don't know whether you found this with your clients, but when I think the people who were as extreme cases as I was, with the binging and the restricting and the constantly different diets, they actually found that the easiest, so sad, but I found this too, the easiest diets to keep up were those liquid ones.
There was no, it was just one rule. It was just, you didn't have to make any decisions.
I don't even have to chew. I don't have to weigh this. I don't have to find it. Nothing. I can just stop thinking about food for one day. And so we would rather be starving and not chewing. That's the desperate, and so that's where so many people get it wrong. When
like what you said, true, about like, that's because the weight loss phase, and the weight loss phase isn't the lifelong phase, you know. And like, healthy habits, they're not something you just do for January, you know, and then you just forget about it for the rest of the year. It's like I say, like toothbrushing, you know, it's not like you do all your toothbrushing in January and forget it for the rest of the year. You know, if you want to have good dental hygiene, you've got to maintain it. And like you say, you know, people are looking for a way out of actually having to learn, and it's hard fucking work. It's hard work.
So hard. And I think that's the thing. We need more people saying that behavioral change is hard, and that your focus should be on remembering your ability to do difficult things, not think that it's going to be simple, because I can't bear how many things are framed as simple, particularly when it comes to food. For us people who don't, I mean, there's so many of us who find food an absolute minefield, and need places where we can acknowledge that. I have so many clients who do extraordinary things and complex things and all sorts of things that they're proud of, and they manage hundreds of people, and they just can't get their head around not worrying about what they're going to eat and whether they've been good or bad all day. And it's just such a shame. It's such a shame. I'm so angry with diet.
I feel like, I don't know, because I, like, back when I used to, you know, do one-to-one coaching, but I still get the same kind of people on my course now. But like, I felt like it's because it's easier to follow a goal than it is to develop a habit, if that makes sense. And you know, it's easier to kind of say, well, I'm going to get to that by that. And I know maybe it's not easier, but you know, it's the way that we function. And we want to have that outcome focused thinking. So like, let's get X number on the scales, or X number on our paychecks, or whatever it happens to be. And that's what those type of people are used to. They're used to achieving outcome-based goals. But the unfortunate thing is, when it comes to your health, those outcome-based goals, they don't measure, they don't represent effort, because like, they just don't. And they don't measure, you know, actually learning, which is like what this whole process is about. It's about learning, trying on, experimenting, finding what habits actually work for you, what times of day work for you, what kind of foods work for you. And actually, failure is a huge I always say that in all my talks. I'm like, the number one thing I want for you is to fail, because that is how you're going to learn. But sorry, I've gone on a tangent there. But I'm curious about if you find that with those particular clients, actually, because they were so goal focused and so goal orientated, that they missed that failure piece, and they focused maybe on that perfectionism piece, or that all or nothing piece. And that was an easier fit for them, rather than actually the hard work of finding what works for you.
Yeah. Yes, I find that all the time. I had to unlearn that in myself, and I think the people who do come to me have recognized from my work that that's something that I can relate to. I think if you're out, we know that things like streaks work. We know that trying to just focus on doing something in a row to some end, it does work in the short term. And so I just tend to find that it can help to turn it into a mission. The mission becomes, I want to make this behavior easy and automatic. And it just so happens that as a result of that, logically speaking, my weight will probably go in the direction that I want it to. And so then you kind of can measure it, like how many times in a row can I do this thing? And it becomes a fun little mission in your overall health, because a lot of the time it doesn't necessarily need to be about food, right? It's like, I want to wake up every morning and I want to carve out some time for myself, and all these knock-on things. Whereas if you just isolate one thing, I want to lose weight, no other aspect of your life is improving. And the self-esteem and the self-compassion and the self-efficacy required to maintain lost, or not even maintain lost weight, to repeat new habits until they become automatic, isn't building. So then you've just learned how to lose weight, And the other thing is, every time you try something and it doesn't work, it's not, nothing's lost. So much is lost. You're disillusioned, you're beating yourself up, you don't believe, you believe a little bit less that you can get there. Just talking about it makes me upset, because people will be like, well, you might as well try it, it's nothing. It's every time you just rack up another, I didn't do it, there's something wrong with me. And what do I do when I think there's something wrong with me? I isolate, and in my case, I binge eat. So it's just no angle of being cruel to yourself is working here.
But the funny thing is, like, it depends how you look at your failures. Because again, if I go back to that maintainer study, like, our conclusion of the whole study was failure is success if you learn from it. But the thing is, people looked at their failures as a personal failure rather than a system failure. So they said, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I didn't try hard enough, I didn't willpower my way there, I didn't have enough motivation, rather than I tried too hard. I can't live on steamed broccoli and chicken for a week. I can't punish myself with HIIT training sessions all day. I tried to get up at 5:30 in the morning every day. They don't look at the systems, which is what we all do. And when it comes to New Year, we always think, okay, we're going to do all of the things. We're going to give up sugar. We're going to exercise every day. We're going to save money. We're going to be nice to our other half, all of the things. And yet the more you add in, the more you take away. It's a concept called goal dilution in psychology, but
goal dilution, did you say? I haven't heard of that.
Goal dilution, yeah. The more you add in, the more you take away from the focal goal. So the less likely you are to be successful at that focal goal. But the thing is, and I've kind of gone off piece a little bit here, sorry about that, sure. But I suppose my point with it all is, like, if we can actually look at, well, why have we failed, and separate it from a personal failure. So, maybe I was too fucking tired that day. Maybe there was a lot on. Was I managing my stress well back then? And it's a funny question, because I often ask people, what are you doing to manage your stress? And eating, smoking, drinking, or whatever. And that's a system. It's not you failing as a person. This is how we're designed. And so, like, I want people to get, and this is something that is so important, and we go through in my course, I want people to get to the point where they can see it as a system failure rather than a personal failure, that they can stop beating themselves up about doing it and actually say, okay, well, actually, let's helicopter out for a second and look at where things went wrong and why, and separate it from a personal, because like you say, as soon as it becomes a personal thing, you get in your head about, well, I'm not good enough, I've done, how many times have I failed? You create an identity essentially around failure. And you create an identity that you are a failure, and that's never going to lead to success.
And listen, we know the diet industry wouldn't exist if diets worked, if we didn't think of ourselves as failures. And you know what? And that's a failure in terms of this massive diet didn't work. How about when you're trying to embed a new way of eating, sometimes a healthy, long-term, diverse, lovely way, that's still really hard to learn how to eat moderately and to enjoy everything. And so initially, for some of us, it still feels like a diet, because we only ever associate discomfort around the change of what we're eating with dieting as well. So that's working against us. And so when I'm trying to help people unlearn the dieting stuff and simultaneously embed new habits around food, which in itself is hard, even if you're eating stuff you love, because it's new and you don't know what's going to happen, and we know all of that. When people create a way of eating that they're happy with, and they could be happy with long term, even if it's moderate and diverse and wonderful, when they deviate from it, that all or nothing thinking that comes with dieting can so frequently come back, just because you didn't say what you didn't do what you said you were going to do, even if what you said you were going to do was great and fine, right? So, and not unhealthy at all, you deviate from it. And so that deviation can be framed either as a necessary opportunity to demonstrate your capacity to come back, which is where we feel most disempowered, right? You can come straight back. If you can demonstrate that, then you're better off having had the failure than not. It's not the failure, the deviation or the blip or whatever, rather than spiraling, because it's the not spiraling and the not feeling bad about it and saying, oh, that was delicious, now I'm going back to the way I normally eat.
And that is such a win,
right? That's a much bigger win. It's kind of like, I always compare it to, like, you know, if you get, like, I don't know, you go to a restaurant, you don't like the food. I was using this example yesterday about something else. You go to a restaurant, you don't like the food, or something happens, you're not treated, just not happy with the experience.
Yeah.
And then they treat the complaint so well that you actually come away with a better opinion of the restaurant than you would have done if the initial food was good.
Yeah.
I feel that way about, if you can come straight back on track, then actually you're going to be really grateful for that deviation or that failure, because finally you're demonstrating that you can do the things that are going to help you sustain weight management long term. You're finally demonstrating the habits of someone who enjoys a range of different foods and feels empowered to say, I'm going to leave that one on a high.
And you're getting away from that all or nothing, because
exactly.
It makes me think of, and fancy word, but you know what I'm talking about, and I'll explain, but implementation intentions. So like, these are also known as if-then plans. So if X happens, then I will do Y. And they call these like failure plans or whatever. But what I really love about implementation intentions is that it helps you get away from this all or nothing mindset. So if I plan to go for a run and it's raining, what are other options for me? And instead of it being run, rain or nothing, so like, you know, welcome to the UK, you know, it fucking rains all the time, you know, this is, if you want to become a runner, you're going to have to get used to this. But like, what are the other options? You know, can I do, you know, online class instead? Can I, you know, put on like a raincoat, go out and play a killer playlist and keep running? You know, like, what are the other options? And once you actually allow yourself to open up your mind to that there are alternatives to all or nothing, you know, new neural pathways can form over time. You've opened up your mind to the fact that there is another possibility, that actually is, there's always options. There isn't just one or the other, that there are options. And again, like, you know, running out in the rain might give you a cold, and so you decide, well, I'm not going to do that one again. And so, you know, then you come up with another alternative, and you trial and you error and you test and you experiment. But my point here is that it's important, like you said, to open up your mind to other possibilities so that you can come back to your home base, come back to, you know, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel energized, you know, what's important for you to feel like a healthy person, without feeling like there's just one way. There's health, or there's
complete neglect of yourself.
Unhealthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Exercise is a fantastic point. I'm really glad you brought that up. Historically, I associated exercise so much with boot camp, punishment for how out of control I'd let myself become, that I would only exercise when I was on a weight loss mission. Otherwise, I did not move. Didn't even go outside really for a walk. I was like, well, what's the point? Because I'm not trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
Now, aside from the fact that, objectively speaking, exercise is not unhelpful for weight loss, so that was counterproductive in itself. It's also like, why am I depriving myself of movement, like of fresh air, all because I've wrapped that all up in, is it going to help me lose weight or is it not? Right. You know, and that, it's just so counterproductive. It's so counterintuitive. So much of it, like, for example, so many people will notice that they've gained weight, become upset because their mission was to lose or manage their weight.
Yeah.
And as a result of a small deviation in their weight, will think, oh, I've blown it. And so what do they do? Eat loads. Now, that makes no sense. I've done it my whole life until 5 years ago, whatever. But I would gain weight, and in response to being upset that I'd gained weight, I would do more stuff that made me gain weight, because that's how I knew to punish myself for what I had done, and also to turn down the volume on the self-talk that was beating me up about the fact that I'd gained weight. I'm a human woman. You know how many times I've gained and lost weight over the past year? Like, it cannot be what's defining whether I exercise, whether I care about myself, whether I neglect myself, whether I binge to a point of discomfort. Like, a couple of kilos, like, I'm a human woman with a brain and a life. And it's mad how many of us just normalize this. Yeah, it's really quite sad.
It makes, one thing like I find that makes me really sad is the scales in general. I'm not a fan of the scales, because I feel like, again, and it's an outcome measure. So you're saying all your effort, all your emotional investment, everything hangs in the balance of what it tells you. First of all, like, it's an outcome measure, but it's not a hugely accurate outcome measure. It depends on how much water you've had, how much sleep you've had, how much, food you've eaten that day, your bowel movements, all of these different things. But more than anything, like, we let our success be defined by that number on the scales, rather than how many times we committed and followed through to something that we said we would do, or how many hours we spent, meal prepping and making sure that we have those foods that are going to help support us to feel our best, or how many times we took a second out of our day because we felt like we were getting too much in our heads or punishing ourselves, and allowed ourselves to breathe. Those are the markers of progress. But yeah, we let the scales tell us how. It's like, if you're training for a marathon, right? And
no, I don't, but I can imagine.
Yeah, no, neither do I.
No idea.
I can't even run. So if you're training for a marathon and you injure yourself, that's not a representation of how much effort you put in. You might have put in loads of effort, maybe too much effort, and that's why you injured yourself. Or if you're saving for a car, and like, that's your goal, and your boiler breaks and you have to pay, or you get a leak in your apartment, and you have to pay for that. That's not representative of how much you care about saving for a car, or how much effort you put in. But yeah, we do the same with our weight as well. We say, oh, well, if I'm trying to lose X amount of weight, and then the scales doesn't say, it doesn't reflect effort. We say we're not trying hard enough, and then we step it up and step it up and step it up, and we go into this deprivation zone where the only thing we can think of to do, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but this is certainly something I see with people on my course when they talk about, previous habits that have kind of thrown them off track, is that we think, okay, well, when we're in that zone, we need to restrict, we need to deprive, and we need to, just tighten the controls on everything.
Yeah, and that becomes really compelling because you felt so out of control for so long. And so that's where it becomes, even though it's horribly toxic, it's also kind of a relief for some people. It's so difficult to get out of that, because it's either one or the other, but you finally feel like, at least I've got some control. And then of course we know how many of those themes run when we talk about disorders, about eating disorders, how often we're talking about control and how disempowered we feel. So yeah, I mean, as ever, I agree with every word you say.
We should just leave it there. Sharia agrees with everything Heather says. We will come to a disagreement. We will.
Well, I just think these conversations are really important, because I feel like a lot of people will relate, but it's hard. We have the luxury, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like I've had the luxury of having this conversation over and over and over again with enough people to be able to notice patterns, to be able to say with confidence that to have a nuanced, balanced conversation about something that's become very controversial and quite rightly very sensitive and tied up in politics and systemic errors and
it's true. Like, when it's quite funny, I'm talking over you again. Zoom is terrible for me because I'm a terrible interrupter anyway.
No, me too.
Bulldozing. what I was going to say was when it made me think of, it's not about, it just made me, Boris jumped into my mind, and the recent post that he did about, it's not about you're not trying hard enough. Often it's because you're trying too hard, you know? And I feel like maybe if we gave ourselves less hard of a time and tried a little bit less hard, and that's why me and you, like, when we both talk about this, and, it's a big part of my course, is like the smaller and the more laughable changes you can make, and I say laughable because they're laughably small, and because they do build that self-efficacy, they build that self-confidence. The easier you make it on yourself, the more likely it is that you'll gain that momentum over time, and you'll stick to it, and you'll do enough repetition for it to become automatic. But I don't know if you agree. I think the messages in the media is that it needs to be hard in order for it to be worthwhile. If we're not trying hard enough, then we're not actually getting where we need to go. And therefore we have this default where we think, oh, well, I'm not trying hard enough, I need to step it up, step it up, step it up. And that's when it becomes so hard. And it comes back to what we were talking about at the very start of this conversation, deprivation. You get into that deprivation zone, and as soon as you're in that zone, you start to feel like, well, I miss chocolate, I miss ice cream.
Because those are amazing things that are delicious. And I completely agree with you. I think we need to take the focus off what the plan and put the focus on what we do when plans don't go to plan, and being able to trust in our capacity to take the same common sense advice we would give our children, to speak to ourselves the same way we would speak to a loved one if they were struggling to build a new habit, to remember the capacity we have to do difficult things, not focus on whether we had 3 grapes more than we were supposed to have in. Snore. Aside from how sad it is, and how we can sit and genuinely cry about it, snore bags. I mean, we've got some serious stuff to do in this world. We can't be filling our heads with that crap. And I'm just so angry about it, because it's what women keep saying to me over and over again. The things I could do if I wasn't worrying about my weight all day, the things I could do if I wasn't worrying about food all day. And that's a direct result of trying to lose weight. Oh, it's a mess.
I know. And it's, I don't know if you feel like this, but what drives me is, you definitely feel like this, because we could just batter on about this all day. But what drives me is this, it's almost like an evangelical feeling that I know something that everyone else might not know, or a lot of women don't know, and I need to share it with them to help them to kind of step into their power, if you will. I don't know if that sounds too cheesy, but actually to let go of that mindset that we're not, our value in this world is not our weight on the scales.
No.
And like, we need to let that go and actually be able to live a healthy and happy life. And I know this sounds so hypothetical, and I actually, on that note, I suppose, so people don't feel like this is so airy-fairy, because I can, sit on my high horse and be like, we need to let that go and find joy in our healthy habits. But when you, like what you've talked to just now, if you've had years of deprivation, like, how do we let go and just find joy in our healthy habits? We've been training ourselves for years. Eat this, not that. Do this, not that. This is good, this is bad. I'm a good person today, I'm a bad person. Let's lie in bed, let's calculate up all the good points and all the bad points, and then we'll decide on where we've come out. And let's be honest, we never come out well in those kind of conversations. So how do people transition then from this diet and deprivation mindset into a more free, into a place of freedom?
Into the sort of strong back, open heart vibe, where you feel flexible. I think it's about making a list of everything you don't think you can do when it comes to certain foods. And indeed, throughout your life, when it comes to your health, make a list of the things you don't think you can do. Start with the one that you have the most faith that you can do. Practice it for a week. Once you've got 7 days under your belt, move on to the next one. And then add another one and add another one. Or, make that 3 weeks or whatever you need, until you feel like, I can define myself as the sort of person who can behave in this way around this food, as an exercise in unlearning. And in that list, add all the other habits you want to change. I want to not take my phone to bed with me, because I know that then I wake up lethargic, and then I overcompensate, and then I compare myself to other people on social media, and that makes me feel bad, and so I want a donut. Like, whatever it is, it's us empowering ourselves to understand how to change habits. Some of them will be habits of consumption throughout our lives. So the same thing that you're doing to try to stop eating a certain food that you've associated, or eat a certain food that you've associated with dieting differently, that's the same thing you do if in a couple of years the doctor says, hey, it would be really good if you ate 3 bananas a day. You'd be like, okay, so now I have to embed a new habit. So the skills that I require and the resources that I require and the self-talk and the planning and whatever else is exactly the same as when I try to embed that habit around food.
Yeah.
We need to take it back to behavior, and feeling empowered to change our own behaviors, as opposed to making it about the food. So I think unlearning wise, to answer your question, I think it's to break it down into, these are the things I don't believe I can do. Well, say for example, people will say, I don't believe I can go to the pub for one drink and then leave. Do that 20 times in a row. And then I'll tell you whether you believe you could do it. And so as a result of dieting, for example, make a list of the things you don't believe you can do. Make a list of the things, the behaviors that you feel are responsible for your unwanted weight gain. And if you want to tweak them, put them in a list and then order it, easiest one first, and start there in a row. We know that behavioral change is not easy, but it's simple. You know, it's repetition of a new unfamiliar behavior consecutively until it becomes automatic and familiar, correct? So that's going to be the case across the board. So let's learn how to change behaviors. For some people, that will be around certain foods. And for me, it would be around if I have a banana, because of all the low carb diets I've been on, not in my head thinking, oh, well, I might as well have a pizza then.
Yeah.
It's absurd. It's absurd.
Can I add a layer onto that as well? And another list to add options.
Please.
I would love as well, one thing that we do in the course and a lot of people find quite helpful, and I just like to do anyway, is I write a healthy habits joy list. So what are those healthy habits that bring me joy in life? Because basically the problem is that we look at health with a loss mindset, as in, you know, what am I trying to say here? Like, we don't look at what we can gain from being healthy. We look at what we can lose. Okay, I'm going to miss out on ice cream. I'm going to miss out on having an extra glass of wine. I'm going to miss out on the time, you know, my lie-in, because I have to get up and go and exercise. We don't look at actually, well, what does it give us back to be healthy in our lives? And so, like, I quite like to start with, well, how can we find joy? Because joy is so entrenched in intrinsic motivation. We can talk about intrinsic motivation another day, but you know, is it that going for a walk in the morning makes you feel refreshed and alive? Is it taking 10 minutes to meditate allows you to not snap at your kids? Is it actually, you know, you love the feeling of a fresh crunch of an apple when you eat it? You like that kind of energized feeling you feel, you know, when you've had a week where you've included more vegetables in your diet, or you love the buzz you get after doing, you know, a Peloton or whatever it happens to be. You know, can we train our brain to actually, because we have such negativity bias, you know, can we train our brain to focus on, well, what does it actually give me rather than what it takes away? Because if we can start to tune into that, then being healthy feels like a privilege. You know, it feels like a treat. You know, it feels like all of these things. Now, I'm not saying, again, it doesn't happen overnight, but we all have those healthy habits that we enjoy. And actually, you know, that helps reframe that deprivation mindset and gets people tuning in a little bit more into, well, what can this give me back in my life?
I completely agree. I always say, focus on what you're moving towards, not what you're moving away from. Simply put, right? Doing difficult things like changing habits is easier when you feel good.
Yeah.
Doing other nice things for yourself. When making kinder food decisions fits in against a landscape of being kinder to yourself in every other possible way. And that's why so many of us learn to put our lives on hold. When I weigh this, I will do this nice thing for myself. I will take care of myself in that way.
I'll only allow myself to be happy. I'll only wear the nice clothes. I'll only
do it now. Yeah. And it will get you there more quickly.
Well, that's why I love, like, your first book, you know, was the kindness method, you know, so it was like, let's cultivate kindness first. Yeah. And then let's think about the weight loss, you know. But also
kindness is acknowledging, sorry to interrupt you, but kindness is acknowledging that there's, you know, we need to find a way to talk about kindness that involves the discomfort of change. Some people think kindness is just doing whatever you want, whenever you want.
Yeah.
But kindness so often is also placing importance on your long-term goals.
Oh my God.
And importance on getting to a place where you're not obsessing about food all day. And that in the short term is a very uncomfortable and difficult process. So we need to find our own definitions of kindness, which makes space for harmless discomfort, I think. And also that deficit-based way of thinking extends to the way that we think about ourselves. So often when we want to change habits, we focus on what's wrong with us and we focus on what's wrong with our habits. And yet you and I know full well that if you want to help a client to better understand themselves and self-sustain change, you focus on quite the opposite. What's right with you? What resources do you have at your disposal, internally, externally, to do this difficult thing? And what's right about your habits? What purpose are they serving? What are you afraid you're going to lose if you don't have them? What might you need to put in place? What are they demonstrating to you? What have they helped you to do up to this point as well, before you decided that they were bad and you needed punishment because you kept doing them? That's what gives you insight into what makes people tick and what they need. Anyone can tell you what's bad about bad habits. When you start asking people what's good about them, how have they served you, what relationship do you have with food, etc., then you get a very bespoke and important insight into that person's needs. And they do too. And they give themselves permission to focus on what's good about their habits and what's good about them.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. Okay. What is your final, have you got any more? I can't, I'm like, I've gotten so much from you so far, but.
Me too. You too. This is so fun. I just want to say, I don't know whether this is going to go in the final video, but we didn't plan this.
No.
And that's so cool, because we really, all we said is that for anyone listening now, we walk in the park together and we've become friends and we do the same job and we talk about so much of this stuff. And we just said, Heather said, why don't we record a conversation, just see what happens? Yeah. And we didn't plan it. And it's just happened I think it's happened exactly as we wanted it to. So my last tip, anything, I mean, of course, self-talk. Practice talking to yourself for 1 week, the way that you speak with a loved one. I think habit change is such a good sort of Trojan horse to get people to speak to themselves more kindly, because we know that speaking to yourself kindly gets your habits changed. You know, it helps you get there far more quickly if you encourage yourself the way you would a loved one. But in the meantime, you're learning to speak to yourself more kindly, which is just so much more important than any of the other stuff I think we've ever talked about. You know, because it's just the most important. That's the only thing you're hearing 24 hours a day. So if we can change that, and the compelling case that I have to put forward for being kinder to yourself is that it'll get you where you want to be, fine. But my real mission is for us all to be nicer to ourselves from a much younger age.
And I think, like you said there, you know, you said it earlier, you change best when you feel good. So you need to start feeling good about changing. And yeah, I suppose if I was to kind of reflect on that, I would say, you know, if we can find joy in our lives, you know, that's going to help us, and joy in our healthy habits. So if we can find, you know, being kinder to ourselves. And you know, it's a funny thing, and I won't go on a tangent because we can save this for another talk, or another chat. But yeah, when you say self-talk, often that's really hard. And I remember for a long time, like obviously me being in academia for years, you learn to be a professional critic. You know, that's what makes you good at your job. And so I got really strong, you know, I've got really strong self-critique muscles. So actually what I started doing was smiling at myself in the mirror, because I couldn't get to the self-talk yet. So I either smiled or gave myself a thumbs up in the mirror. And I know it sounds so silly, but that was a baby step for me to then open the doors to positive self-talk. And sometimes it just made me laugh because how stupid it was, to be honest, you know, but it was something that, you know, helped me then open it. And it kind of goes back to, yeah, we need to start small. We need to start easy. Anyway, sorry.
Well, I just want to say one final thing on that, by the way. The self-talk thing, everyone thinks, well, a lot of people very often think that it's going to be this like harrowing Pandora's box of, oh, what am I exploring? It's just because we don't check in with the way that we speak to ourselves. So habit change is a wonderful way of turning up the volume. You put yourself in a bit of voluntary, harmless discomfort, and you will hear the way you're talking to yourself if you choose to listen in, whether it's the excuses and the caveats and the negotiations, or the critical self-talk, or the self-limiting beliefs, or whatever else. Now, I hate it when people say, replace a negative thought with a positive one. Yeah. It's like, if I could do that, I would be on the news, or I would be a wizard. Yeah, exactly. But I do think that you can debate with it, and you can fact check. Because a lot of it is fake news, or it's outdated. And we don't, like with our professional lives, we check in and we go, oh, I used to be not very good at this, and now I'm really good at this because I had this training and this experience, and now I define myself as being good at this. We don't check in with the way we're speaking to ourselves. So many of us are being limited by the beliefs that were given to us by like some teacher when we were 12, just because we haven't investigated it. And so whenever people think that this might be like a fluffy exercise into telling yourself you're wonderful all day, it's not. It's just being fair.
That can help too.
Yeah, sure, if you want to, but as a first point, just update, fact check, and be fair. As a first point, you know, at least talk to yourself the way you would a stranger. Let's start there. Not even a loved one.
I love this because, yeah, it's like, I don't know if you've seen the exercise. I don't know if it's some from CBT even, positive truths. You know, when you've got, so it's a way of, maybe it's a way of fact checking. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's something I get people to do on my course. But for every kind of, we talk about thoughts or habits too. And we talk about, okay, well, what are the top 4 rhetorics that's constantly going in your head? Like, what are the top 4? Can we actually readdress that negativity bias and look for the truth in that? So what's a positive truth? So, you know, a typical negative thought people would have is be like, well, I'm a failure. I always fail. I'm just going to fail again. You know, what's a positive truth in that? Well, how many times have you tried? You know, you're actually a trier. You're someone that actually keeps coming back despite the failures, and you still want to learn, and you still want to get there, and you're still motivated to see that through, and you still care. That's a positive truth. And it's not about, you know, walking through the world with rose tinted glasses and like telling yourself, like you say, telling yourself you're wonderful and that's going to cure everything. It's actually looking for the truth in those negativity statements, because there are strengths to be found in there. And because of our thoughts are like, you know, I think, is it for every 5 or 6 negative news or negative comments, you need 1 positive, or you need 1 positive for every 5 negative, and we're 5 times more negative than we are positive. Don't quote me on the exact statistics because that's probably not right, but it's something big like that. It was a Baumeister talk, Roy Baumeister, but yeah. And so we need to readdress that balance. We're so much more likely to be in the negative. So if we can look for it, like you said, the fake news, what are the positive truths there, you know, and what are the strengths that we can draw out? At least, even if it's just one thing, what's the one mean thing that you say to yourself the most? You know, and it's not, I'm not saying let's reframe and let's be positive or whatever, but just be curious and let's be truth seeking in that. Like you say, let's look for the fake news in that, and instead, you know, what actually, you know, what could be a positive truth about that? And there might not be. It might be actually, you know, that there isn't one there. But, you know, I'd be curious for people to experiment with that.
So would I. I think so. And I think also, if you say, for example, one thing you hear is, I'm the sort of person who starts things and doesn't finish them. A self-fulfilling prophecy, if ever there was one, when you get to the point of challenge. Well, how about if you made a list of all the things you started and finished?
Yeah, love
and
it.
Debated it with that, just as a starting point, just fact checking, you know. Anyway,
yes, let's leave it at that, because we'll have covered everything in the first one. Now we will. But yeah, Shrew, always an honor and a privilege to talk to you. I just love it. And I apologize for all the interruptions. I just get overexcited.
I loved it. You didn't. In fact, I was trying to control myself, and also the fact that it's the amount that you know is so impressive and exciting to me that I just want to suck out all the information from your brain and put it into mine. So just spending time with you, I'm so grateful for. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, I hope that this has been helpful for some people as well, besides me and you, because it's 2 big benefits here for both of us. But yeah, hopefully it's, you know, sparked some ideas and inspiration in other people as well. So
let's hope.
Thank you so much for your time, Shrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.